Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 672, and today's date is May 20th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Control over the Middle East is Fading, which will push war forward. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, Greece is having major problems, as everybody knows. We've been talking about this for quite a while. But there's a new report from the Hellenic Confederation of Commerce and Enterprises suggesting that Greece is losing about 22.3 million euros every single day if they do not make a deal. And if they do make a deal, it will put them further into debt, and they will never have an economic recovery. It's completely impossible with sustaining this type of debt load. And right now, Greece is looking to put a special levy on banking transactions at a rate of about 0.1 to 0.2%. And their aim is to collect about 300 to 600 million euros on a yearly basis. And the fee is not going to be including ATM withdrawals, transactions up to 500 euros. But anything above that, you will be basically taxed. And we can see right now that they're not looking to give any of this over to the IMF or anything like that. They're using it to fund the operations of the government. Now, Moody's released a report titled Outlook for Greece's Banking System is a Negative, which it did the unthinkable. It explicitly said that the worst case for Greece now is all but certain. And if the government doesn't concede to the Troika, there is a high likelihood of basically capital controls and deposit freezes. And this is why the people of Greece, they are continually taking out the money from the banking system. They're keeping the money. They're hiding it because they understand when all of this starts to fall apart and there's no deal, if Russia doesn't step in, Greece will default. And the people will lose their money that is sitting in the banks or whatever is left of it. Because we saw this happen in Cyprus, where one day the people on Friday went to sleep, they woke up Saturday and the banks were closed. They couldn't take out any of their money, and we're starting to see the same thing occur now. Now, we understand the government officials, the ECB, the U.S. government, central bankers, they're all out there telling us how the economy is doing much, much better. We're in a recovery. Europe, we see it in the corporate media that Europe is doing much better now. It looks like they're coming out of this recession. And really what we're seeing is basically Europe's economy has been down so long, even a bit of growth looks like a recovery, but it is not. Basically what is happening right now, the Eurozone improvement, where they had growth about 0.4% in the first 3 months of the year, is smaller than it was before the global financial crisis that started in 2007-2008. So nothing actually got better. Yes, of course, the corporate media is out there saying, oh, look, it's growing once again. But again, we have to look at this, and the economy is still smaller than it was before the global financial crisis in 2008. Gross domestic output, all the spending on goods and services in the economy, came in around 2.434 trillion in the first 3 months of the year. That's below the 2.472 trillion euros from the first quarter of 2008. So we're really not seeing any type of an improvement in Europe. Here in the United States, what are we seeing? Well, we understand there are massive amount of layoffs. We see it in the retail sector. We see it in the small mom and pop businesses. We see it in the large corporations. And we understand that the BLS just doesn't count any of this because we've seen it with all the layoffs in the energy sector in Texas, Louisiana, where they just don't count those people. They just disregard it. Actually, we don't even see the layoff news in the government numbers or government reports. And there's a reason for this, because back in March of 2013, the U.S. Department of Labor no longer issues mass layoff reports. Obama ordered this across the board when he introduced spending cuts required by the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act. How convenient. So going forward from 2013 on, no layoffs. There's no report. Nobody knows what's going on. And we can see right now that we have to look to private companies, and they're showing massive amounts of layoffs. Challenger Christmas is showing that, yes, starting from the beginning of this year, layoffs have increased. They're not counting all the layoffs from all the retail stores that have been closing, and there's thousands upon thousands of retail stores closing, because they want to keep this a complete secret. They don't want this information getting out there. They just want you to look at their massage manipulated numbers that they push out to let you know we're in a recovery. But we are not. I mean, look at Caterpillar for a second. We reported on this many, many times. And we see Caterpillar right now, they laid off thousands of people. They bought back stock. They closed plants. They're doing whatever they possibly can to survive, because what they're seeing is their sales are continually declining. Caterpillar right now has reported 29 months of declining global retail sales, with the month of April seeing a 16% collapse in China, 25% plunge in 2014, and a 20% plunge the year before, while Latin America just suffered an epic 44% crash, the biggest going back to 2009 after a 28% drop the year before. And what are we seeing? Well, to put this in context, during the financial crisis of 2008, Caterpillar suffered about 19 months of consecutive retail sales decline. As of April 2015, this number is 29, where they've been in the negative region for sales. What does this tell you? That it was pumped up, it deflated, and it completely crashed going forward from about 2013 on. The whole thing is falling apart. And this is an indicator that around the world, the economies are completely falling apart. And this will lead right back to the United States. Because what we normally see, and this was back in 1929, 2008, we normally see other countries get hit first. Europe, back in 1929, they were in a recession/depression. Moving forward closer to the crash in 1929, America looked like it was doing absolutely fantastic. The good times were here. I mean, of course, yes, there were bread lines. There were people out of work, but of course the official story coming out of the U.S. government central bankers was everything's fine. Nothing to worry about. We saw this in 2008. During the year of 2008, the central bank came out, and that's the Fed, came out and told us they're not forecasting any recession now or any time in the future. They told us everything was fine once again, and we're hearing the same thing. We see manufacturing still down, still falling apart. We see the Baltic Dry Index. It was pushed up by the raising of the capsize rates, and it brought it up to like 640 points. Then we saw it drop to about 620 to 614. Now we're at 606. It's falling once again because there is no demand for the goods. There's no demand for the goods. Guess what? Factories, manufacturing, they're not producing. They don't need the raw material from the bulk dry carriers. And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a total collapse right in front of our faces right now. No one wants to admit to it. No one wants to admit that we're in a recession at this point. They're just looking at those incredibly fantastic 5.4% unemployment numbers and the stock market continually rising and gold being suppressed. This is what they're looking at. The whole thing is a complete illusion. And most of the people who are not awake or not realizing this, who have not been following what has really been going on, they're going to be caught off guard, just like in 2008. Going forward, people had no idea this was coming, and the same thing is going to occur. We understand a lot of these central banks, economists, are out there looking to have a cashless society. And we can see that this is getting louder and louder. The mainstream economists are saying, yes, we need this. But when we really look at this, we see that bills and coins account for about 10% of the M2 monetary aggregates in the US and the Eurozone. Presumably, the goal of this policy is to bring the percentage down to zero. No cash at all. Banning cash would most likely need to be coordinated between the US and the EU, because if it was just one, either the US or the EU, it wouldn't work. And this is what the central bankers want to do. They want to enhance the tax base, as most or all the transactions in the economy could now be traced by the government. Force people to convert their savings into consumption and or investment, thereby providing a boost to GDP and employment, just like everything the central bankers and U.S. government tried before with quantitative easing, with manipulating the numbers, putting more countries into debt, starting wars around the world. It's not going to work. By lowering the gas prices to get people to go out and purchase, it will not work. The reason? It's because the American people, the European people, they're tapped out. They're barely surviving. We're barely surviving. And one of the main reasons they want to do this, it's to stop bank runs on the banks. Think about it. Nobody can run to the bank and ask for their cash. It would be all electronic. But there are problems to this. If there was a cyber attack or a cascading bank failure where the entire system comes down, nobody could get their money. It would all be stuck in the system. But this is what they want. This is what they're going for. They realize, and this raises a lot of red flags, that eventually, just like in all the countries around the world, people are going to want to get their money out. Well, look what's happening in Greece. They realize that there's going to be a bail-in. They're going to come after their money. So they're taking their money out. Here, they want to stop that. They want to stop the bank run. In Europe, they want to stop that. And this is why there's a push for a cashless society. And what's very interesting about all this is that Bank of America, in a note to their clients, advised holding gold and paper currency at this time. Bank of America described the markets as being a twilight zone. Well, they definitely are. The stock market, S&P, all of it, Dow, NASDAQ, it is completely the twilight zone. The real economy in the U.S. is not currently strong enough right now to support what's going on in the markets. The economy right now is not strong enough to withstand a rise in interest rates. Raising rates right now, like they want to do, will cause a shock to the markets, and the economy as will completely fall apart. And basically what it will do is the corporate and household debts will become unserviceable. The housing market would completely implode on itself. The U.S. government would not be able to basically pay the debt. The revenue that's coming in is barely enough right now, because you have to remember, most of the people who went from these full-time jobs are now working part-time, or a lot of people don't have work. There's 93 million people who are not working right now, bringing in revenue to the government. There are those people who had high-paying full-time jobs where they now have maybe one or two part-time jobs. They are bringing in maybe a quarter or half of the revenue they were bringing in before. So if interest rates go up, it would be a complete disaster. Now, we understand the U.S. government central bankers, they've been trying for a very long time to remove the weapons from the people. They have about 2,000 laws on the books infringing upon the Second Amendment because, as they know, they can't get rid of the rights of the people. And they know this, and this is why they continually write more and more laws. And all of them are null and void. I mean, in Washington, D.C., there was a law that required handgun carry permit applicants to prove that they need a gun due to imminent threats or dangerous workplace conditions, and this has been halted by the U.S. District Judge Frederick Scullin Jr., who said on Monday that the requirement infringes on the citizens' constitutional rights. His decision, published by Firearms Policy Coalition, says basically the requirement makes it impossible for the overwhelming majority of law-abiding citizens to obtain licenses to carry handguns in public for self-defense, thereby depriving them of their Second Amendment right to bear arms. And this is the same with every single law against the Second Amendment. They're null and void. If you read the Second Amendment, it shall not be infringed upon. You cannot limit the Second Amendment, and that's what all these laws do. They limit the Second Amendment. But we understand why they want to remove the weapons from the people, because a people that cannot protect themselves or a people that cannot fight back is a people that is controlled by a government. And our founding fathers they continually tell us this, that no, we need to keep arms because as a people, it keeps the government in check. And throughout all of this time, all the government has been trying to do, they've been trying to remove the weapons from the people. That's it. They use manipulated statistics, they use false flags, whatever they possibly can. This is what they do. And the government is not working for the people. We can see with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is kept under lock and key. You have to go into a special room. You can't bring a camera. You can't take notes. And if you mention anything about it or reveal any part of it, you can go to prison. Of course, it's a national security agreement, and this is why you can't release any of the information. But again, it's a trade deal. Basically what it is, it's a way to give the power over to the corporations. Elizabeth Warren basically is out there saying, yes, she read this, and this is horrific. This is not for the people whatsoever. Michael Wessel read the TPP, and he agrees with Elizabeth Warren saying, yeah, this is not for the people. And what's interesting about all this, now, remember, you can't take notes, you can't cite anything from the TPP, you can't mention it, and Obama is out there continually saying, you need to tell me what's wrong with this trade agreement. Not one that was passed 25 years ago. You need to tell me what's wrong with the TPP. But they can't. And they can't do it publicly. Because they're not allowed. So they're really in a catch-22 situation. The law prohibits us from talking about the specifics of what we've seen, allowing the president to basically say, all right, tell me what's wrong, but you can't. So everyone is put into a corner, and they really can't explain what it is. And this was done on purpose. Because they don't want this information getting out. They want it passed. It's for the bankers, the corporations, the elite. It takes the sovereignty away from the people. And we discussed the TPP many, many times. Europe is having a problem with the TPP. U.S. restrictions on access to documents and the insistence of secrecy are undermining trust in the TPP and in the talks about the TPP. And this is coming from the European Union's transparency watchdog. They're saying, how can we trust the United States government central bankers if it's all a secret? Again, Would you ever purchase a home without reading the contract or having your lawyer read the contract? Would you sign it? Would you purchase an automobile without reading the contract? No. So why would we pass this or sign off on this if we can't discuss it, we can't read it? It makes no sense. The only reason you would do this is if you're hiding something. And this is what they're doing. They don't want people to know what's in it. And this is why it's kept a secret. We see out in Ukraine, the GDP has declined by 12% in 2015. Of course, the IMF's told us it was going to grow. And again, they were wrong once again. And I can see that going throughout this year, the GDP is going to fall even further. Ukraine is collapsing. The Ukraine army, under the ceasefire deal, has basically shelled Donetsk 33 times in the last 24 hours. We understand the United States government gave Ukraine a $1 billion loan guarantee. Now, of course, this is a guarantee, and Ukraine will not pay for this if something happens. The taxpayers will. And we understand they set up a moratorium and, to get all those dishonest lenders, but they don't want to pay them back. And we can see, when we look closer at all this, who holds the bonds of Ukraine? Russia. They hold about $3 billion worth of bonds, which are maturing in 2015. So why do you think they set this law up? Because they don't want to pay Russia. They're going to say they're a dishonest lender. And we don't have to pay. And it's backed up by the U.S. government with this loan guarantee. And Russia said, listen, if they're going to go down this route and they're not going to basically pay us the $3 billion and they're going to default on it, we're going to sue. That's what we're going to do. And we can see they're not cooperating with Russia whatsoever. They're doing whatever they possibly can to move away from Russia. They're building a wall. They're going to put Russian people in prison. We see that Poroshenko right now terminated the military technical cooperation with Russia. We see Yatsenyuk is out there, and he is calling on the parliament to now allow foreign military in Ukraine. We know that Poroshenko put out a bill, and they want them to say, yes, let's bring in the foreign military. And we realize the United States is already in Ukraine, along with Poland, UK, and other nations. They're training the Ukrainian armed forces. And we see that the U.S. military brass is discussing keeping the trainers there until 2016 or longer. And their security training is going to turn into combat training. Very interesting. We also see Ukraine is open to hosting a missile defense system. Now, all throughout Eastern Europe, the United States government, central bankers, and NATO have been saying that, no, the missile defense system is for Iran. But since the P5+1 talks have been going on, and if that does go forward and they agree, they don't need the missile shield, but we're not going to see that missile shield come down. Because it really was never for Iran. It was for Russia. And this is why Ukraine says, okay, we would like to be included in this missile shield. Now, we understand that France is not selling the Mistral ships to Russia. The United States is putting a lot of pressure on them. There are rumors that China might buy the Russian Mistral ships. And this would be the U.S.'s worst nightmare, because then they could just turn around and sell it to Russia and just hand over their ships. But there are problems with this. We understand they are rumors. The European Union are, to a certain extent, limited in their ability to sell weapons to China due to an arms embargo, which was imposed by the EU in 1989. However, the ban is not strictly enforced, as it is open to interpretation. And China does purchase some weapons, but we can see they most likely will bring this up and say, no, these ships cannot be sold to China right now. And they can't even sell the ships to China unless they get permission from Russia. But if Russia and China make a deal, Russia definitely would give permission, and Russia would definitely then get the ships if they were going to work out that deal that way. And we'll have to watch that to see how that goes, because right now France is just sitting on it. They have the ships, and they're just sitting there. Now, out in the Middle East, we see the situation in Yemen, in Libya, in Iraq, in Lebanon, all completely falling apart. The United States government central bankers, their control is fading in this area. And what we're seeing right now is they're losing the ability to maintain control in this region. And I wouldn't be surprised if this authorization for war all of a sudden comes up once again out of nowhere. We know it's just been sitting in Congress. They're waiting for that special event to push that forward. And we see the Yemen government, which is exiled, which the people kicked out. They're saying that they will not have talks with the Houthis until the rebels pull back from the land that they seized. Well, I don't know. I mean, the president was thrown out of his own country by the people. I don't think he has a right to say anything at this point in time. And again, the Houthis, they weren't invading any country. They were taking back their own country, just like in Ukraine, when the United States was behind the people in Ukraine, and they threw out Yanukovych, and he fled to Russia, and they took over the country. Well, isn't the same thing happening in Yemen? But it seems they have double standards. And we can see that Iran is trying to bring in humanitarian aid into Yemen. The ship is very slow. It's a cargo ship. And the U.S. is basically threatening Iran at this time, saying, listen, you will bring this ship to Djibouti. You will not park in the ports in Yemen. We don't care if you have permission from the UN, and the UN did give them permission to do so. And it looks like Iran is saying, okay, listen, we will go to Djibouti. We will unload our cargo. The UN can inspect it there, not the US. And the U.S. officials are now openly talking about the possibility of military options against this ship. They are provoking war in all different areas. If you notice, they let off. They kind of stepped back from Ukraine for a little bit. They moved into the Pacific, the Stratly Islands. They moved into the Middle East, which they've been with Iran now. And they're moving towards North Korea, bringing up and using propaganda to provoke these countries. And it seems like they're just rotating around the globe at this time. Now we see the people in Iraq, they have basically taken over the area of Ramadi. Now, of course, the United States government central bankers are out there, and they're telling us that, no, the Islamic State, they have taken over this area. They're in control. No, what's happening in each one of these countries, these are the people who are rising up and taking back their countries. In the past, when the United States government had a puppet government in place, they called these people Al-Qaeda. Oh, we need drone attacks because Al-Qaeda is coming. Oh, we need to hit this certain area because there's Al-Qaeda. No, it was the people of the country trying to take their country back from the puppet rulers. And now what they're using the Islamic State. And they're saying, the Islamic State just overran this city, and now the Islamic State has this territory. No, basically the people have this area. And we see the same thing occur as it did in Mosul, where the Iraqi army just dropped their weapons, and they said the Islamic State moved into this territory, and they captured all the weapons. Well, the people picked up those weapons. They're using those weapons. The weapons the Islamic State gets, which is a small group of proxy army mercenaries, they're dropped off by the U.S. government, UK, And this has been done many, many times. And right now, the people have the U.S. tanks, they have artillery and armored vehicles in this area. And we can see right now, the United States is losing control in this area. And this is why they're talking about speeding up arms in Iraq, giving more weapons to the Iraqi army and the other coalition forces that are in there. And they are pushing this very hard because they are losing control of what is going on. And this is why they want to split up Iraq. They tried to push this on the government of Iraq, but that didn't go over very well. They wanted to separate this into a Sunni, Shiite, and Kurdish area. And this is what the Islamic State has been pushing, which is the proxy army of the United States government, Israel, UK, and other countries, where they want to split up all these countries into Shiite, Sunni, and Kurdish, into very small areas so there's no fighting and the dollar can continually be propped up when they sell their oil. And we can see right now they are continually pushing this, they're losing control, and this is going to lead to further war. And they're just waiting for that special event to occur, which the United States government central bankers will create. We see the Russian embassy in the Syrian capital of Damascus was shelled on Tuesday, and Moscow states that this is an attack on its diplomatic mission, and it's an act of terror. And of course, as we know, the Islamic State is closing in on Damascus. They have basically removed the Syrian army from many different locations. They pushed them back. Their area has tripled because what's been going on is these weapons that the United States has been dropping off has been filtered up into Syria. The Free Syrian Army, those soldiers that are trained to defect right to the Islamic State. And all this bombing is to destroy the infrastructure and to push the Syrian army back. And this is why the Islamic State, the proxy army of the United States government, has grown, not shrunk. But they're trying to convince us, oh yes, it has. And this is why they're asking for a safe haven at this time. We see right now that the U.S. government is pushing the agenda of blaming Assad for a chemical weapon attack. Now, we've been talking about this for quite a while, and they're saying that he's been using chlorine weapons. And we know that the Islamic State, they have been using chlorine weapons. Just like the Free Syrian Army back in 2013, they were the ones who used sarin gas on the people of Syria. Why in the world would Assad use chemical weapons or chlorine on his own people? It makes no sense. So right now the U.S. government is saying no more red lines, and they're asking the UN to step in. We saw this in Lebanon and Libya, where they asked the UN to step in. And look what happened. The countries are a complete disaster, and they're trying to do whatever they possibly can to get into Syria at this time. And they're mounting and getting ready for a major offensive. Basically, what is happening right now is exactly what they wanted to do back in August of 2013. They wanted to do aerial bombings, destroy the infrastructure, let the Free Syrian Army move closer and closer to Damascus, and create safe havens of the areas they've captured. And this is what they're doing right now. It took them, 2 years to get this done? Because of Russia. Russia stepped in and pretty much stopped their plans. And the United States tried all different other ways of getting around this with the Geneva II talks, trying to have Assad step down. And they tried many different things, having Assad's government be removed from all the embassies in the United States. The United States threw them out, saying, they are no longer the government. They're trying everything they possibly can because their goal is still the same. Tactics are changing, but the goal is always the same. Now, the U.S. Federal Reserve, they are saying they were hit by hackers. The St. Louis Fed told users of its public economic data analysis tools that the bank discovered the breach in April. The bank said hackers compromised the domain name register, and they sent people to phony sites. And the fake sites were designed to look like the web pages of the service provider of the Federal Reserve. And the St. Louis Fed is one of 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. Basically, what's happening right now is they're getting ready for a cyber attack. They want it to look like they're getting hit. They have bills pending in Congress like CISA where they want that passed. And they're doing whatever they possibly can to convince the people that Russia, China, North Korea, Syria, the Islamic State, that they will be hitting the United States. We already had a warning from the proxy army, the Islamic State, saying that yes, they're going to be hitting the key infrastructure areas of the United States. And we can see that the U.S. government central bankers are continuing with their propaganda. North Korea right now, they're saying they are making pocket-sized nukes. North Korean defense officials claim they can make nuclear weapons small enough to strap onto a missile. And again, we've heard this many, many times before. And most of the times when this propaganda does come out, it's when a country is making a deal with China or Russia economically to bypass the dollar, to build infrastructure. And right now we hear propaganda coming out of the corporate media once again. And we can see they're provoking North Korea. They're provoking China in the Pacific, the Middle East. They're pushing war there, and it is not working out. And the economy is crumbling to pieces at this time. Europe is crumbling to pieces. And this cannot be sustained, and eventually they will go right into some type of an event to cover this up. When will this be? We don't know for sure. But we know it's coming, and coming very, very soon. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.